Well, if you like heat, today's the day for you. We're going to break some records, potentially 26 degrees, something like that, and could be a great beach day as well. Just fantastic for May 15th. We will take it. Thanks for joining the show, everybody. We appreciate it very much. We'll open the phone lines in about an hour's time and find out what is on your mind, and that I'm sure that some of you might want to talk about. I don't know why you'd want to talk about, but the Toronto Maple Leafs and their collapse last night and an embarrassing loss on home ice to the Florida Panthers. And it was embarrassing. I'm sure that if you were to ask the team, they would tell you that. But they're going to say the same old routine, the same old sports cliches. They're going to Florida, backs against the wall. Nobody knows what this team can do. We only care about each other in the room. All that same old crap. Well, the bottom line is that the Leafs are, well, look, I suppose they could come back and win the series. I'd be shocked if they did. But this team is clearly, I don't know what the answers are. I really don't know what you can do. They changed the coach. They seem to have good leadership at the coaching position. They bolstered the defense. They added some good key players. They seem to have some depth. But for whatever reason, the top guys just cannot get it done in the playoffs against teams like Florida. They cannot do it. Mitch Marner and his spinoramas and his giveaways is just getting old. I'd let this guy walk. I really would. I just don't see him materializing into being maybe perhaps in a different market he would be that guy. I don't know. But Matthews looks lost. Look, people are saying that the effort's not there. I don't know that I believe that. I just think that they're just not designed, for whatever reason, to beat teams like Florida, and Bobrovsky doesn't help when he shuts them completely down. And Wall, look, I'm not blaming Wall, because Wall has played for the most part pretty good, but he's given up some goals in key times and key spots when a big save would have made the difference, and I think Stolarz would have perhaps made a difference in the series. But to going from up 2-0 and potentially 3-0, if not for an overtime loss, to being down 3-2, it is a pretty big collapse, folks. Anyway, look at it. That all said, perhaps some of you might want to weigh in on some of this when we open the phone lines, as mentioned, in about an hour's time. But how about those Edmonton Oilers? Wow, another conference final. And they got it done against Vegas. This is a team that knows how to get it done. And Skinner, another shutout as they beat Vegas 1-0 in their own barn in dramatic fashion. So good on the Edmonton Oilers. They certainly know how to get it done. The Leafs could certainly learn a lot from them. And the Winnipeg Jets look to avoid elimination tonight when they host the Dallas Stars. So Leafland, it's a sad state of affairs. But in the end, what the heck? It's just hockey. And we should be used to it by now. But you know what will happen? The regular season will start next year, and the Leaf jerseys will come out, and the Leafs will have a great regular season, and it'll be the same old story. Oh, this is different this year. Yeah, right. Some things never change, folks. And I would say that the Leafs and the playoffs is that. Some things never change. That's enough of that for now. Again, perhaps some of you might want to weigh in on this when we open the phone lines. I got a number of things in the pile that I can get to. Lots and lots of interesting things, including Mark Carney and no budget. This is the first misstep, in my opinion, of this government. I think it would have been a great opportunity for the Economist and the highly touted Mark Carney to make a statement and deliver a budget. Let Canadians know where the spending is going to be and how they're going to pay for all the tax cuts and whatever else they've got cooking, and show us your plan. But no, they're not going to produce a budget. Instead, they're going to have an economic fall update. And I think opposition parties have the right to be upset about this, and Canadians should be as well. This is a missed opportunity for Mark Carney, again, the financial wizard, supposedly, to produce a budget. But no, they're not going to do so. So what's your take on that? That's something that you can talk about. Industry Minister Melanie Joly says Honda of Canada remains fully committed to major electric vehicle investments in Canada after the company announced yesterday that it is pausing a multi-billion-dollar EV project in Ontario. Actually, it was Tuesday when they made the announcement. Of course, the federal government has dumped billions of dollars into this industry. Do you believe that Honda's CEO when he says no jobs will be lost. I don't think we can take that to the bank. And does the EV industry have a future in Canada? I don't know how it can, folks, based on what's going on in North America and the United States right now. I don't know how car manufacturers can make a go of it in the EV world in Canada when the regular manufacturers for the internal combustion engine jobs are disappearing because of tariffs and the war with the U.S. The auto sector is in a serious state of flux. So this is something else that you can talk about. Also, EV mandates. Should we drop EV mandates? I think it's 2035 that all new vehicles in Canada need to be EVs. And is it time to drop that mandate altogether? And I would say that probably the writing's on the wall. And lots of other things, as mentioned, I've got in the pile that I can get to, and we'll open the phone lines in about an hour's time. I'd like to thank Vanessa Van Ness, as always, on the other side of the glass at the control boards, doing a fine job, as always. All right, joining us now is Jim Cormier, Atlantic Director with the Retail Council of Canada. Jim, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so I saw the story on the Global News website. I'll read a bit of it, and then I'll get your take on some of this. As stock markets rallied after news of a 90-day trade war truce between China and the U.S., some stakeholders remained cautious about what it could mean for the Canadian economy and consumers. So what's your takeaway on the economic environment that we're in right now, and what's happening with the U.S.?
Well, obviously, it's still incredibly challenging. The announcement of a 90-day truce is good news. I'll put my optimistic hat on for a moment, but people need to remember that with all of the mayhem that's been going on over the last number of months, that it's not like we're going to a position of where we're better off than we were in December. There's been a lot happening. So, a 90-day truce, great, we'll take it, but we're not popping the champagne bottles yet. There's still a 30% tariff for products coming into the U.S. from China. And, of course, as we understand, when we're a smaller player, that has ripple effects on all other countries, including ours, that, we're obviously worried that, eventually China will raise prices, and they're likely not going to raise prices just for the United States. That could result in product price increases for countries like ours as well. And to take it to the next step, these tariffs are not just happening to China. The U.S. is putting these on countries all over the world, and we import product from all over the world. So, it's more of a cautionary tale. We'll see where it ends up, but, we're still, taking a look at this, and we're very cautious because, the last thing we need is to see price increases on a lot of products that come into this country from other parts of the world.
Is it inevitable that we'll see price increases, though, based on what's happening in the United States? And although, like you said, there's a 90-day pause, but supply chains and China and shipments and all of that, I think it's inevitable that there'd be a spillover to prices here in Canada from products made in China. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm not an economist, so I'm gonna park that one for now. But suffice it to say, everything that you said is correct. We are so intertwined, our world economy. There's been a lot of talk about how intertwined we are with the United States, but we are with many other countries too. And, obviously we produce a lot of product here in Canada, but, think of, retail goods that you buy. Most electronic products come either from the United States or from Asia. There are food products that come from all over the world. Those are just two very small examples that, if there are tariffs from, the behemoth that is the United States, and that has a significant impact on country A, B, and C, well, chances are their prices are going to have to go up eventually when they're shipping to all other countries, not just the United States. So, when it comes to retail, other than food, we don't necessarily see the impacts of trade disputes immediately, but eventually it does start to bite.
Having a state of flux and unpredictability and volatility, this has got to drive retailers and importers crazy, I would think, when it comes to planning and long-range planning. What are your thoughts?
Completely, yes. We like predictability. And, for larger retailers, they might have the ability to pivot that, if market A, not market A, but if supplier A, all of a sudden their prices have gone up for whatever reasons, maybe we'll pivot quickly to supplier B. You can't always do that, though. And then, of course, smaller retailers, they're often more locked in where, if prices go up from their supplier, they have no choice other than to eat it. And, I know that, over the last number of years, we've chatted about this. Retail were often, target number one for public anger. But, what we'd often remind people is that those price increases at retail were the result of price increases all through the supply chain, multiple steps before it ever got to the retailer. So, we're the ones that have to deal with the public ire, but that's the problem with all of these trade wars is that eventually this does create price increases throughout the supply chain and ultimately at the retail store.
All right. What about developing trade agreements with other countries? It would be hard to replicate what China does for this country when it comes to imports and low price volume. What are your thoughts on diversifying our markets?
Well, that's true. But, again, retail is so diverse. If you're a higher end retailer, you may not be getting your products from China. But if you are more of a discount retailer, then, you're looking at trying to source products for as cheaply as possible. And China and, certain Asian countries are sources for those types of products. And, people can say, comments for and against that practice. But the fact is, especially if you are a low-income Nova Scotian or a low-income person living anywhere here in the West, you're looking at those stores as options to be able to buy products that you want and need. So, when it comes to those countries, it's there are other countries that you can look at, but it's not that easy. If costs are going up in all of these countries, then that means the prices are going up as well.
Which branches of retail are the most vulnerable to this trade war with China? Would it be? I would think the dollar store would be the kind of the epicenter of all of this.
Well, for China, you're looking at a lot of products that come in a bit more cheaply. Your fast fashion, your certain food products, not necessarily fresh food, and your discount store items. Those would be some, but yet it's not limited to that. Obviously China is also involved in electronics. They're involved in manufacturing cars through other companies, but they do that. And then I guess to be a bit more general. The point is we don't get all of our product from China, but, we're dealing with a trade war with the United States. Product comes out of there. We're dealing with the repercussions of, as I mentioned earlier, the U.S.'s trade war against virtually the world, resulting in price increases for suppliers in all of those countries that may end up having to raise their prices for all countries in retaliation, including Canada. So, it's I'm not painting a rosy picture, but retail, we're used to disruption, and our members are doing what they can to pivot to try and source quality products from countries that can give them the most competitive prices. But it ain't easy.
I was going to say, it's not. How realistic is it to replicate what China does when it comes to producing cheap goods? To use that term, not in a pejorative term, but it's reality. Inexpensive goods, whatever it might be. And our reliance as consumers and family budgets on that. What are your thoughts on the hit to family budgets when it comes to trying to replicate what China can provide us?
Well, that's it. It's difficult. They are such an enormous economy, and they have such a huge workforce, and of course, without going down the political rabbit hole, there's a reason in some respects why they're able to offer cheaper products. So I'm not the spokesperson on those issues, but the point is they do provide product to stores at a discounted price, and so for people here in this city that rely on cheaper product to be able to make ends meet, it's very difficult. So again, there are other countries out there that provide and produce competitively priced items, but they may not be able to produce it at the magnitude that China does.
Jim, appreciate your time. Thanks for your insight. We'll do it again.
Thank you. Anytime.
All right, take care. Jim Cormier, Atlantic Director, Retail Council of Canada. We just want to be a world-class college. That from the president of NSCC. We'll chat with the president when we come back.
Facts.
NSCC President Don Bureaux joins me for a chat. Don, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Morning, Todd. Always great to speak with you.
All right. So I read in a recent interview or article on the CBC website, your quote was quite succinct, but to the point. We just want to be a world-class college, right? That's a pretty succinct message, isn't it?
Absolutely. Look, we recently were given the opportunity to confer degrees to students aligned with the changing needs of the economy, and I want to be very clear that we're going to use that amazing opportunity to be a world-class college to serve Nova Scotia.
Okay, tell us about Bill 12. For those who don't know the background of Bill 12, just give everybody an overview. I'm sure you're quite well-versed in it, obviously.
Yeah. Bill 12 basically made some changes to the Act that created the Nova Scotia Community College. And in that Act specifies different responsibilities of our Board of Governors, of the provincial government, and in many ways, it was what I call house cleaning. We were doing and operating under those rules of engagement for many, many years. But the big change is the ability for NSCC to continue to offer certificates, to offer diplomas, and now we have one more tool in our toolbox, which is the conferring of degrees to our students.
Okay, so what's your take on degrees? And again, this ties into what we're talking about. How you feel as though the 10 universities are already doing a pretty effective job with this. What's your take? What's your message when it comes to degrees?
Well, look, we are blessed, quite frankly, in the province of Nova Scotia to have 10 world-class universities, and we work very closely with each and every one of them. But across the country, we're seeing a trend. We're seeing colleges now being able to offer degrees, and that's really as a result of the economy continuing to change and become more global in its nature. So we are interested in looking at degrees that are very applied. We don't want to duplicate degrees. And there are certain industries that require more than a diploma. And that's what we want to do in going forward. Okay.
Do you have any concern over government's involvement or overreach? I chatted with your counterparts at the university level, and there's some concerns about what they call overreach or potential for overreach from government involvement in curriculum, et cetera. Any concerns with that?
Yeah, for us, it's not a concern, Todd. Great question, but for us, it's not a concern. We were created back in 1996. This is coming up on our 30-year anniversary, and that model that we have in Nova Scotia, which I think is a great one, is to work in partnership. That's the key word: to be aligned with industry, to be aligned with government. And to make sure that the offerings that we are providing meets those priorities. So no, this isn't an issue that I get concerned about overreach. No.
Okay. In the end, I think people attending Nova Scotia Community College, for the most part, if you ask them what their objective would be, it would be to get a job at the end of the day, right? Is that fair to say or not?
I think that's spot on. There's a couple of reasons why. One would be to pursue a career, and that's what our programs are designed to do, to be aligned with the needs of the economy and where the great careers are going, whether it's in things like AI, the ocean sector, or healthcare or the skilled trades, and many, many others. But what we're also finding, Todd, which is interesting, which is our students are looking to bundle educational experiences now. So they may come to NSCC for a couple of years and then move on to a university or vice versa. And we're soon going to have almost 5,000 graduates crossing our stage in early June, and we're very excited about that.
Okay, how do you determine or decide what programs to add or to keep? Or I would think that this would be a very challenging task.
Yeah, it is. It is an art and a science. So every single year, we do a very thorough and comprehensive program review. We have about 130 to 135 programs, Todd, and every year we may make adjustments. We may expand, we may contract, we may add programs, we may put programs on pause, and that's a healthy, normal course of business for us because, to answer your question directly, we offer programs that our industry partners need for a changing economy. And all that's geared towards building the economy and quality of life of Nova Scotia. Their programs have to be connected to careers.
Okay, and what's the methodology that ensures that is happening, that's the result?
Yeah, great question. A very comprehensive program review process that we're looking at everything from enrollment trends, graduation trends, employment trends, deep and rich conversations with industry partners. And one of our superpowers are our faculty members. Our faculty members are all recognized to be experts in their field, and they maintain very strong connections with the industries that they've worked in prior to coming to teach with us. So you add all that up, and I think, and I would stand by the process that we go through to expand and contract our programming.
Okay, so it must be difficult, though, I would think, to cancel or to end programs. That must be a tough task, I would think.
Yeah, certainly it is. It's always a process that we go through, that we're looking at numbers and to make sure that our programs are, again, meeting those criteria that I outlined earlier. So, yeah, it's definitely a process where we're looking at expanding and contracting. But the key point of all this is to make sure that the graduates of NSCC are able to contribute to the prosperity of this province by having the skills and knowledge that they need in a changing economy. And I'm very proud of that, and I'm very proud of the team I get to work with every single day.
All right, and the trades and building, electricians, carpenters, all of that, I would think that would be no end in sight when it comes to opportunities for growth.
You got it. Yeah, Nova Scotia is certainly in a bit of a boom right now when it comes to construction. So we are doubling down on adding seats in the construction trades, being much more flexible, if you will, in terms of program starts. So traditionally programs start in September. We're having more almost a continuous mindset of starting programs throughout the year. And really, again, working with our partners in the construction industry to make sure that what we're providing is what they need. Another area, Todd, that's very high in demand right now is the healthcare sector. Yeah. And again, we're adding literally hundreds of seats in the healthcare sector to meet that need.
Which jobs in the healthcare sector?
Right across the entire spectrum, to be quite frank with you. We're looking at our practical nursing programs, our continuing care. They are able to find great careers not only in the hospitals and the medical facilities, but also long-term care facilities, which are being built quickly in the province. But we're also seeing the other areas of the healthcare sector in high demand, medical lab technicians, physiotherapy assistants. All those programs would be programs in which we would make sure we have the right programs being delivered in the right locations to meet the local demands.
Don, good chat. I appreciate your time. Thanks for doing this.
Todd, thank you for your interest and all the best.
All right, take care. Don Bureaux, NSCC President. New federal health minister will have work cut out for her, according to an advocate. We'll chat with that advocate when we come back. Stephen Staples is the National Director of Policy and Advocacy for the Canadian Health Coalition. Joins me for a chat. Stephen, thanks for joining the show.
Hi, Todd. Nice to be back.
All right. So we now know who the federal health minister is. Earlier in the week, I read a story in which you were quoted in saying that you had that the new health minister would have their work cut out for them. So indeed, we know that the health minister is from the riding of Papineau, Marjorie Michel, Canada's next Minister of Health. What are your thoughts on the choice, first of all?
Well, she looks like a good choice for health minister. Although she's been elected to the House of Commons for the very first time, she's a first-time MP, and as you mentioned, she was elected in Papineau in Montreal. That was Prime Minister Trudeau's old riding. But she is no stranger to politics, Todd. She's what the Montreal Gazette called a seasoned liberal strategist. She worked inside the Prime Minister's office. She was the first Black chief of staff inside the PMO. Has worked with other former cabinet ministers as a staffer, including Jean-Yves Duclos back when he was Treasury Board president. He later went on to be health minister. So I think she's someone who's not new to politics, but is a new face for probably most Canadians. But she seems to me to be someone who knows the insides, the machinery of government, how to get things done. Although her resume is a little short on healthcare, we don't know that she has a lot of experience in that area. But we're confident that she's going to know how to get things accomplished, and there's a lot to do, Todd, in the health file.
Was she on your radar when you were speculating as to who it might be, or did you have a short list?
No, she wasn't on the radar. I mean, of course, we were watching Sean Casey over there, neighboring PEI, a little bit closely. We know he was chair of the health committee for many years, and we know him well. We've met him many times. But this is a new person, and a lot of people in the cabinet are new, although Carney announced a 28-member cabinet on Tuesday. Now, the majority of cabinet ministers have been part of Trudeau's Liberal caucus. 13 of them are first-time MPs, including Marjorie Mitchell. So we're looking forward to getting to know her well.
Okay, so what are some of the biggest challenges that she faces?
Oh boy, the list is long, Todd. I mean, we've got 6.5 million Canadians without access to a doctor or a family doctor or a primary caregiver. We've got a majority of Canadians feeling like their healthcare system is in crisis. Just looking we did a national poll last summer, and I was just looking at what people in Nova Scotia were telling us. Top issues for people in Nova Scotia: shortage of healthcare workers, wait times. Over half people in Nova Scotia reported avoiding emergency wards, which is not good news. That means their health conditions could get worse. And in fact, it's a little bit higher in Nova Scotia than the rest of the country who feel a similar way. So the health minister, while health is not at the top of the flashy files, Carney's cabinet is mostly focused on jobs, development, investment, all the economic files. But we've found in the past, Todd, that health is one of those sleeper issues, and that eventually this often does begin to take center stage. So I would expect that as Canadians want to see movement on healthcare, they want to see pharmacare continue to be spread across the country. Plus, there's $50 million a year go from the federal government to the provinces in federal transfers. 1.4 of that will go to Nova Scotia. She's the minister responsible to make sure that money is well spent, and that will be our top concern when we hope to meet her soon.
Yeah, the Trudeau government, of course, was looking at strings attached and looking for results-driven funding. Do you support that, or do you think that'll continue?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, because we absolutely support that. While a lot of money goes from the federal government to the provinces through the Canada Health Transfer, as I mentioned, about $50 billion slated for that. That has to meet the requirements of the Canada Health Act, which is the federal legislation there. But there's not really tough strings attached to it. So one of the things that we proposed is that they do bilateral agreements between the federal government and the provincial governments kind of alongside the Canada Health Transfer. So extra money where more conditions can be placed on it and attached to certain programs. For instance, pharmacare is a good example of that. The Liberals under Trudeau brought in public coverage for pharmaceuticals related to contraception and to diabetes medication. We've only got 3 provinces signed on: PEI, Manitoba, and BC, 1 territory, Yukon, before the election was called. And we would like to see new bilateral agreements for pharmacare negotiated with Nova Scotia. For instance, we know that 75% of people in Nova Scotia wanted to have their province signed up for pharmacare. We're hoping that Tim Houston and Health Minister Michelle Thompson will be talking on the phone to the new health minister to see if they can get brand new funding for Nova Scotia to help cover these 2 areas of prescription drugs for absolutely free for people in Nova Scotia.
Okay, jurisdictional challenges and issues. We know that healthcare is provincial jurisdiction. So how much of a challenge is it to navigate those waters?
Yeah, it is. And we've got Dominic LeBlanc there from New Brunswick. He's going to be continuing on as the Intergovernmental Affairs Minister. He'll have to work closely with Health Minister Michelle on getting those deals involved. He has been involved in dealing with the premiers in the past. The premiers don't generally like the federal government moving into what they perceive as their area. But the fact of the matter is, Todd, healthcare is all levels of governments are involved in it. The federal government, the provincial government, of course, plays a major role, but even municipalities are involved in healthcare. So this is a shared responsibility. It requires a lot of cooperation, willingness to work together, and you're dealing with a lot of different situations. You got to have some flexibility, of course, for the individual provinces because there's maybe different priorities across the country. But overall, we want to see that level of cooperation move forward to help make healthcare better for everyone, and that we've got a really good, solid national public universal healthcare program across the country.
How about recruitment and that file? What role can the federal government play when it comes to recruitment?
That's going to be a big role, Todd, and one of the major commitments of the current government is something called national licensure for doctors and nurses, so that they'll be able to practice in various provinces. And we've already seen some movement on this amongst the provinces themselves in the Atlantic region and elsewhere to allow healthcare providers to move from province to province. There are some concerns over that. We want to make sure it's done well and that it doesn't leave a situation where provinces that can pay more are poaching from other provinces. That's just robbing Peter to pay Paul, and it's not going to solve the problem. But if we can make it so that this system can be nationally coordinated, we need more healthcare givers. That's for sure, and the federal government will be leading that, as well as making sure that credentials from foreign trained health professionals can be recognized more quickly. We're looking at more seats in universities for medical training. This is another commitment of the Carney government. So while the Carney government doesn't have huge ambitions in healthcare, I had mentioned there will be some money. $4 billion is planned to come into improving hospitals and other healthcare infrastructure like long-term care homes. It's not a top priority. Obviously, the economy is right now. But as we found over time, this is one of those issues that keeps coming up over and over again.
Yeah, we hear the term crisis used quite a bit, that adjective, and you would like to see a sense of urgency and the whole healthcare file viewed as being a crisis, I'm assuming?
You bet. I mean, obviously, we've got this big problem to the south of us with the United States and possibly 1 million jobs in Canada being lost, and we've got this healthcare crisis already. We can't lose sight of that, and this could get worse, Todd. As the potential fallout from trouble with trade with the United States and more people losing their jobs, possibly, that could also mean people are getting dumped off their private healthcare benefits. That means they're going to be relying on that public healthcare system, whether it be pharmacare, dental care, or other types of care. So we don't want to leave those people in the dark. We think that public health care provides an essential support to folks in hard times. It's, they call it the social safety net. Healthcare is part of that to catch people when they're falling. And so I think despite the fact that a lot of it is on the economy and the jobs, healthcare is going to play a crucial role in getting Canadians through these tough economic times.
Okay, Stephen, appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thanks, Todd.
All right, take care. Stephen Staples, National Director of Policy and Advocacy for the Canadian Health Coalition. Canadian Blood Services sets its most ambitious recruitment goal ever. 1 million new donors. We'll discuss this when we come back. Canadian Blood Services has set its most ambitious recruitment goal ever, adding 1 million new donors in the next 5 years. Krysta Hanakowski is the Community Development Manager at Community Blood Services and joins us to discuss this. Krysta, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so tell us about this ambitious endeavor, 1 million new donors in the next 5 years.
Yeah, so as demand is growing on our healthcare system, the need for new donors has to keep up. And right now it's not. So that's why we've set our most ambitious recruitment goal ever, 1 million donors in the next 5 years. And the reason for that is that there's been advancements in clinical care that just require more like blood products, more blood transfusions. So it means that the demand for plasma and blood is growing in Canada.
Yeah, an interesting statistic and quite alarming, actually. Only 2% of all eligible people in Canada donate blood. That's obviously speaks volumes as to why this is so important, right?
That's correct. Right now, we have about 400,000 people that are donating enough blood to support the needs of the hospitals right now. But there's 40 million people in Canada, so that's less than 2%. And it just isn't sustainable, especially with our population that's growing and aging. So that's why we really need more people to become part of Canada's Lifeline.
Okay, why do you think that the numbers are so low? I suppose you could speculate all day long, but why? Because I think, and surveying indicates that the vast majority of people, 3/4 of Canadians, believe that it's important. So why do you think that doesn't translate into real numbers, at least not yet?
A lot of people know that it's important, but I think a lot of people also think that other people have it covered for us. But the main reasons are that our population, as I mentioned, is growing and aging. So we're just not keeping up. And over the next 5 years, it's projected that we're going to need 10% more blood donors and 50% more plasma donors. So I think now's the perfect time. We want to encourage people who have been on the sidelines to get off the sidelines and come on out and try it and experience what you give when you help give at Canadian Blood Services.
What are some of the kind of testimonials of people who have been long-term donors?
I think the biggest thing you'll find is you walk away with a sense of achievement, a sense of purpose, and a real sense of community. You're there with a lot of other people who are donating, our staff who are helping the donors save lives. So you really walk away with a powerful sense of connection.
Okay. Any rural regions or any more vulnerable regions in particular, or I would think that might be a challenge. What can you tell us about that?
So I think everybody needs to come and donate. Did you say rural regions?
Yeah, rural.
Yes. Okay. So if we're talking about Nova Scotia, but in the Maritimes in general, there's hundreds of appointments that go unfilled every day. So we do have, for example, a permanent site in Halifax, but there's a mobile set of staff that go out throughout the week to different communities in Nova Scotia, same as New Brunswick. So I think even if you aren't in one of the major centers, to have a look at blood.ca, you can type in your postal code and see where the nearest center is to you. So whereas our clinic in Halifax is open 6 days a week, we might only go to some of those other communities once every month or 2 or 3. So it is important to be looking or checking our website to see when it's in your area, because we really need the most impact in those rural areas those couple days that we are there.
Okay, again, if people want to know more about all of this, direct them. You just did so, but say that again, please, so that people who are interested can find out online all the details they need to know.
I would encourage people to go to our website, blood.ca, but they can also call our number, 888-2DONATE, or they can download the Give Blood app. At any of those spots, they can find more information, and even they can talk to a nurse if they have questions about eligibility or anything. So on our website, blood.ca, a little chat box will open for them to ask, and at our number, 888-2DONATE, they can talk directly to somebody.
Okay, Krysta, appreciate your time, and we'll keep in touch, and we'll follow up. Thank you.
Thank you. We really appreciate you helping spread the word.
All right, take care. Krysta Hanakowski, Community Development Manager at the Canadian Blood Services. And again, just 2% of eligible people donate blood, which is startling. And it's been a very, very long time since I've done this, but it's something that I think I should do, and I'm going to commit to doing because it's important. By way of Vanessa agrees, by way of I guess some personal connection with this. My father, who's no longer with us, he passed away a number of years ago, but was the blood donor director in St. John when I was growing up for the Red Cross at the time, before it was Canadian Blood Services. And so, this is near and dear to me, and it's absolutely something that we can all do and need to do, and the need is real for sure. So I would encourage everybody to go to their website and become a blood donor. It's a good thing. I saw this story. I thought I'd read a bit of it. Nova Scotia has added uranium to its list of priority critical minerals, has issued a request for exploration proposals at 3 sites The potential uranium exploration sites are Louisville in Pictou County, East Dalhousie, Annapolis County, and Millet Brook in Hants County. Natural Resources Minister Tory Rushton says the list includes critical minerals that the province considers a priority for development. Rushton says the province hopes to reap economic benefit from the exploration, but a department official said any potential mining project could be decades away. New legislation passed in March lifted a moratorium on uranium exploration that had been in place for more than 40 years and ended a 15-year-old ban on uranium mining. Premier Tim Houston said the legislative changes were needed to make the province better able to withstand economic challenges that would result from U.S. tariffs. So this is something that perhaps some of you might want to weigh in on, the development of natural resources here in Nova Scotia, and this government, which it's ambitious and feels as though it's necessary in order to be economically independent and viable, especially considering the challenges of tariffs and the U.S. trade war, and you don't know what's going to happen globally, right? So, of course, the yin and yang to everything is you balance it with the environment and the environmental issues. This is a small province geographically. A lot of people can say that, well, they're doing it in Saskatchewan and Alberta and other provinces and other jurisdictions, and therefore we should as well. But it's not always apples to apples. Because we, again, have a very small geography, relatively speaking, comparatively to those provinces and those jurisdictions. That all said, there's always risk to everything you do when it comes to this. And we do benefit greatly when it comes to extraction of natural resources in other provinces by way of taxation and ultimately transfer payments to this province. And some would say that it's hypocritical to say that we should not develop uranium and other natural resources while benefiting financially from other provinces that take the risk. Shale gas is another example of that. But again, I get it. It's not always a one-on-one comparison because of the geography of this province. So this is again something that is of interest. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that we should be moving ahead, full steam ahead, when it comes to developing natural resources, including uranium in this province? 50 years, or 40 years rather, we've had a ban on this. And it's an interesting debate. What are your thoughts on this, or anything else you've got in your mind? The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Also, opposition parties attacked Prime Minister Mark Carney yesterday for being vague about his plans after his government said it would not table a federal budget before the House of Commons rises for the summer. Following the first Liberal cabinet meeting after the swearing-in ceremony, the finance minister said instead of a spring budget, the government will put forward an economic statement in the fall. And I think that this is a missed opportunity for the government and for Mark Carney, who's supposedly a financial wizard, and we know his background. So why not build a budget and table a budget and let Canadians know exactly what your plans are? Perhaps a misstep by the Mark Carney government. What are your thoughts on that, or anything else you've got in your mind? Again, the way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Your calls when we come back. All right, taking your calls. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Lots to get to, as there always is. I teed a couple of things up before the break. I'll revisit them and add a few more things as well before we get to your calls. Again, 902-405-6000. Nova Scotia has added uranium to its list of priority critical minerals and has issued a request for exploration proposal at 3 sites. The Natural Resources Minister, Tory Rushton, says the list includes critical minerals that the province considers a priority for development. So what are your thoughts on natural resource development here in Nova Scotia? Do you support it? Do you think that it's a good idea? Is it necessary? The government says that it is necessary in order to diversify our economy and to ensure economic prosperity and independence moving forward. And look, I think there's an argument to be made for that. The counter to all of this, of course, is the environment and balancing the environmental concerns, which are real and legit. Now, that said, there's always risk with everything, and there's a good argument to be made that other jurisdictions in this country take this risk every day. Alberta, Saskatchewan, other provinces when it comes to extraction of natural resources. And we benefit from it economically here in Canada and with of course, through transfer payments and taxation. That said, again, look, there's so many layers to all of these to most stories, and this is another example of that. And that is our geography is quite different here in Nova Scotia. And we are a small province, geographically speaking, and that matters when it comes to extraction and proximity to communities and habitat and all that goes with it. Watersheds. So what are your thoughts on extraction of natural resources? Should we be moving forward with this? Or is it still too dangerous and something that we should be looking at other ways to diversify our economy? Or perhaps the green sector and solar and wind and all that goes with that. 902-405-6000. Also, Mark Carney and his finance minister will not table a budget this spring or the fall this year at all. Instead, they will produce an economic update in the fall, and opposition parties are attacking the Prime Minister over this, and I think that there's some legitimacy to their concerns. Why not table a budget? Sure, it's going to take a lot of work to do so, but I think that in the spirit of transparency, it would be the Canadians deserve and should know how our money is going to be spent and what the plan is. So I think a lost opportunity and a misstep by the Liberals. What are your thoughts on that? 902-405-6000. Industry Minister Melanie Joly says Honda Canada remains fully committed to major electric vehicle investments in Canada after the company announced yesterday or Tuesday that it was pausing a multi-billion-dollar EV project in Ontario. Joly said that she spoke with Honda Canada's president and CEO, who assured her that no jobs will be lost. Do you believe Honda is saying no jobs will be lost? And does the EV industry have a future here in Canada? I don't know that. I don't know how it could, quite seriously. When you look at what's happening with the automotive sector and tariffs in the U.S. and the state of flux that it's in, and EV demand is down quite a bit. And in the United States, EV mandates are being dropped, if not already dropped. So I don't know what the future of the EV industry is here in Canada, but I don't know that the federal government should be sinking any more money into this beyond the billions that it's already committed to. 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. All right, let's kick it off with the chat with Peter. Hello, Peter.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Well, you?
Good. I'd like to talk about the energy issue that you brought up, Todd. In 2015, I was on a fishing trip with Tim Houston, and I made him aware during that trip that Nova Scotia has the second largest uranium deposits in Canada, second only to Saskatchewan, and that up in the Musquedoba Valley, we have 3 trillion with a T, trillion cubic feet of natural gas that, if accessed, could make Nova Scotia not only energy independent, should be able to cut our power costs virtually in half. And at the time, Tim Houston had promised he was going to do something about it, and it never happened. And then in the next election, he promised people inside the mining industry he was going to do about it, and still hasn't done it. And Nova Scotians need to realize that even though they've approved requests on the project, if the polls don't show that he has support, he still won't do it, because the Premier's more than happy to take welfare checks from Alberta to the tune of 20% of our annual budget and let them take the risk when he doesn't have to.
Yeah, that's true. What about the concerns with the environment? Do you share those concerns?
I do, but people have to realize that 30% of the power in New Brunswick comes from Point Lepreau nuclear project.
Yeah.
If we had 3 nuclear reactors in Nova Scotia, we would be entirely energy independent and net zero. And the technology even from 45 years ago, which has been problem-free basically up at Point Lepreau, safety measures have included. And then I look at the advances in fracking, and it just doesn't seem fair to me or to anybody else that, as you pointed out, Todd, that Alberta and Saskatchewan, other provinces take the risks, and then we benefit from not taking the risk. Probably one of the best things that's happened in Canada is forcing Canadians to look inside themselves and say it's time that we stood up for ourselves. The issue is all of those concerns can be addressed. There is virtually zero reason not to go ahead, especially with uranium, because uranium breaks down in the environment. So you can either capture it, so it's not breaking down in the environment and ending up as radon gas in your basement, or it can be used on an industrial level and there's a worldwide demand for it. Why shouldn't we be resource rich in Nova Scotia when we have resources and the Premier flat out refuses to take advantage of them?
Well, the Premier's not flat out refusing. He's moving forward with it, is he not?
Well, he flat out with 2015, but when he says he's moving forward, he still has to have approval from stakeholder groups. And all it's going to come down to is the polls. If the polls say that it's good for him to go ahead, he'll do it. He's not going to do it because it's right or wrong. He'll do it based on polls.
Yeah, well, that's politics. All politicians operate that way, though, don't they, Peter?
Well, everybody does, but the reality of it is we're being forced into a corner now. If you look at the amount of conditions that Danielle Smith just put on Ottawa, it's impossible for Mark Carney to meet them without completely scrapping his net zero policy.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do? Because I can tell people in Nova Scotia, if Alberta separates, we'll be bankrupt within 24 hours because 20% of our budget and our entire healthcare budget is funded by transfer payments from Alberta.
Yeah. Well, Peter, do you think that that's Danielle Smith kind of playing hardball and kind of taking a page out of Trump's book, Art of the Deal, go high and then go in high and go in guns blazing and then settle somewhere in the middle? Do you think that might be what's going on here?
There's a possibility because she was the only premier who individually went down and actually met with Trump and has an understanding and probably read his book. People haven't read Trump's book, you can't understand Donald Trump. It's that simple. But here's the point, Todd, is that Danielle Smith is not making the decisions. She has a strong committees and groups behind her that are saying, if you don't do this, Danielle, you're going to be replaced.
Yeah.
So her hands are tied. That's why she changed that legislation and dropped that bar down to 177,000 votes in order to move ahead with the referendum. Yeah. Right? So right now, I have no idea how Kearney, and given what he just put in for his cabinet.
Yeah.
I mean, virtually everybody that he put in there was a failure at their original job post. And if that was private industry, not one of those people would be back in that position. And then I take a look at, here's Chrystia Freeland, who's an absolute disaster on trade, and now she's involved with internal trade here in Canada. So you have to ask yourself, okay, if you were running a private corporation and you pulled the move that Carney just pulled, your company would be bankrupt within no time. Your entire board of directors would have been removed. Your shareholders would have said enough of it. Now, here in Canada, a lot of people didn't realize they were shareholders.
Yep.
And they went out and voted based on a fear campaign about tariffs. But at the same time, Todd, during the election, I didn't hear anybody talking about Chinese tariffs. If you look at our lobster industry and our seafood industry, I mean, that's been hammered by tariffs. And same thing with the canola industry out west to the tune of billions of dollars.
That's a good point.
And nobody's even talking about it.
That's fair. Fair comments, Peter. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
Thanks, buddy.
All right, take care. Fair comments. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, email from Glenn, then back to the phones. And by the way, the way to reach us, of course, is 902-405-6000. When it comes to natural resource extraction, Glenn says this, folks in Nova Scotia need to look at a map of Nova Scotia and then one of northern Alberta. Nova Scotia is only 60 miles wide. Nova Scotia is literally full of lakes, rivers, brooks, streams everywhere. Look at the map of New Brunswick. Nowhere near the lakes and rivers. Northern Alberta is even scarcer. You can't compare Nova Scotia to other areas. Maps don't lie. Health comes first, and I think that there's some validity to that, Glenn. I really do. Doesn't tell the whole story, but it's certainly a big factor in the story, no doubt. 902-405-6000. Len's giving us a call. Hello, Len.
Hello, Todd. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you. Go ahead.
Oh, what a beautiful day it is. 23 degrees. Fantastic. I love it. Anyway, I hope you've given up on the Leafs because the way they played hockey last night, they didn't deserve to win a game anyway because they played lousy. And even their audience there, the fans were booing them in the end.
Yeah, well, you said the way they played hockey. I think you're being generous in even saying they played hockey.
No, they didn't play hockey at all.
No.
And the only reason they got a goal at the end is because the Panthers just let up a little bit because they were up 6-0.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's not what I want to talk about.
Okay.
I just want to say what a terrible job they did filling the potholes on the Bedford Highway between Flamingo Drive and the Windsor Exchange.
Okay.
They poured asphalt in there, and now we've got nothing but a bunch of speed bumps on that road, and it's terrible to drive on it. I mean, if you're going to fill potholes, then at least dig them out and then fill them in properly and make it level with the rest of the highway.
Yeah.
All they did was pour asphalt in and then pound it down, and now it's like driving on speed bumps the whole way. It's just terrible. I think if you were getting these people to fix your driveway and they did that kind of a job, I don't believe you'd pay them one red nickel.
Yeah,
anyway,
sad.
The other thing is I think the resources we have in Nova Scotia, I think we should be getting benefit from them. As long as they're done properly and it doesn't hurt the environment or people living in particular close to the area, I think it would be all right. Why not generate some money and revenue from all this stuff? I think it'd be great. The other thing I want to say quickly is not forming or not showing the Canadian people a budget this late in the year and not even putting one out this year at all. That is not acceptable.
No, not at all. I agree with that.
I'll leave it with you now, Todd, and I hope you have a good day.
Okay, thanks, Len. Appreciate it. 902-405-6000. But that's the thing, right, with natural resources, there is risk associated with it, of course, to the environment. There's always risk. But I think that it's a valid concern and a valid argument that our proximity here in Nova Scotia to natural resources and communities and watersheds and all that goes with it is true. Like the email Glenn wrote was a good point. Nova Scotia is only 60 miles wide. And you look at the topographical map, and he's absolutely correct. He's bang on. That makes a lot of sense, and that needs to be considered. That has to be a factor. 902-405-6000. Greg, hello.
How you doing, Todd?
Doing well, you?
You know, I agree. You know, there's risks to everything, which is true. There is. But at the same time, which the natural resources that we have in this province, why should we take advantage of it? Okay? Maybe we'll end up being one of these have provinces instead of have not. Look at Alberta and Saskatchewan.
Well, Newfoundland as well, of course, with their oil oil resources.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think uranium mining, whatever it was, now it's a lot better than it was years ago. Okay, so you know you had an expert on there, and it said there's a lot of stuff that they do now that they didn't do years ago. Okay, to protect things like that. But again, there's a certain amount of risk, right? But at the same time, we have to try to get some money here, generate some income, and generate some activity and all kinds. Because really, it's changing the world. And what you got going down in the States? Well, maybe push comes to shove. But at the same time, maybe we start doing that. Maybe we start having money set aside. That we have money and we can pay our bills a lot better. I think it's a good idea. Yes, you said you're right. There's a certain amount, and the environment's one of them. But I think it's changed since the last 30 or 40 years when it comes to this sort of thing. Well, because now we know a lot more than we didn't know today.
Yeah, there's definitely been.
I think it's.
Sorry, Greg. There's definitely been improvements in when it comes to standards and all that goes with it. But it really the only argument against it is the environment. There's no economic argument against it. And so the environment or the economy. But can you have both?
Well, you maybe I don't know if you can have both. But here's the flip side of this: when you could start making millions and millions and millions of dollars okay? And when you can facilitate making healthcare a lot better, you can make social programs a lot better because you have the extra money.
Yeah.
I don't think Nova Scotians would really say no to that. If you have extra money and you have if you have programs that need to be done, you've got it funded, you don't have to take the money from the taxpayers. I think that's something to look at.
So you're a yes when it comes to moving forward with natural resource extraction. You're a definite yes, obviously.
Well, I just can't. I can't see. I mean, I'm not totally, in the dark here, but I'm thinking, push comes to shove, we've got to try to do something here. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, living in and having billions of dollars in debt and not being able to pay our bills because we're taking from one to another. This might be just the thing that we need to try to survive a lot better than we have over the years.
Okay.
Just saying.
Okay, Greg. Appreciate the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. It really comes down to risk versus reward, right? I think it's pretty evident there's a business case there for natural resource extraction and things like uranium. The world needs uranium. The world needs lithium. The world needs these minerals and energy, of course. The world needs natural gas still, because it's considered to be a bridge technology to whenever the green and the green sector can get fully up and running in full flight. We're a long ways from the green sector being able to replicate what hydrocarbons produce. A unit of energy from a hydrocarbon is when you look at the cost that goes into it, and the energy that's needed to extract it and to get that to market is significantly and exponentially less than the green sector, at least so far. It costs a lot more money to produce energy through the green systems, whether it be solar or wind or whatever it might be. Now, that said, long-term viability and sustainability needs to be considered. And we do need to transition and pivot at some point. We'll definitely have to do that. But in the meantime, we're going to need energy. And we need lithium, and we need all these things. And we have it here in Nova Scotia. So the argument is to be made that if we have it, let's utilize it, let's do it safely, and let's do it responsibly. But, of course, the argument out there is that with some people, they'll never consider that an option because they don't feel as though it's worth the risk. What are your thoughts on it, folks? Should we be developing natural resources on a bigger scale here in Nova Scotia, or is it just too risky? That or whatever else you've got in your mind. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. We're continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Tony, good morning.
Good morning, Todd. Todd, two things real quick. No, it won't be real quick, obviously. January 6th, Parliament prorogued. No Parliament thus far. Parliament will meet on sometime after the 26th of May, at the throne speech, I guess, is the 26th of May. Yeah. And then they'll immediately go on vacation till the 16th of July. That's in excess of 6.5 months. That is unbelievable, and they're not going to put a budget out. So who's watching the cash register? I'm more worried about, not you, but people are worried about the environment. You better be worried about your pocketbook. You better wake up. This is I've never heard anything like this. So what are they going to do? They're going to lead with executive orders? They're going to just go ahead and do whatever they want to do or spend the money? Who's going to approve this stuff? Yeah. Who's going to do this?
I think you make some legitimate points.
And then my last point is, I'm going to talk about the environment and the elements that are available. Look, 60 years or 70 years ago, the 1960s, 1970s, people weren't as environmentally attuned as they are today. Mm-hmm. You know, it was dig, baby, dig, drill, baby, drill. Well, look, we're 70 years advanced, and the techniques, you have to go look at it. I mean, I'm not an engineer, and I don't completely understand what they're talking about, but most of these companies, and I'm not saying all, most of the companies involved in this exploration are environmentally attuned. They know what's going on. They know they got to meet these standards that are put out, and they also know if they don't, that, excuse my phraseology, the tree huggers will be right on their butts. So the bottom line here is Nova Scotia going to be a have-not, begging hands out, bitching about the transfers province, or is it going to come into the new day? What are they going to do? Make up your mind. This is terrible. I agree with Premier Houston. I agree with your position as well. There are dangers. There certainly are dangers. But if monitored properly and people are forced to follow the rules, they will, because there's big money there. Truly big money, generational money. They will follow the rules. And you just got to enforce them. You have to do it. And if you don't do it, then you're going to run into problems. And if you don't do it at all, you're going to run into bigger problems, because you're going to constantly have your hand out. And one day somebody, i.e. Danielle Smith, is going to say, we had enough. We ain't giving you anymore.
Yeah. Well, it's fast. They're already there, right? And I get their argument as well.
Yeah. They're already there. So, are you going to prolong the agony? I don't want to say anything bad about Carney, because I said yesterday, let's give him a break. But this thing that the population can't see who's banging the cash register and for how much doesn't cut it.
Yeah, I think Tony, why not deliver a budget? And you're absolutely right. How long has Parliament been prorogued and not sitting? And we need government. We need a budget. It's plain and simple. We need and deserve and should be demanding a budget.
Absolutely. And even, they have 3 months, I don't know when, I guess September, October. It'll give them 3 or 4 months to get it together.
Yep.
I understand they're brand new at this, but, you took on a job and you're getting paid big money for that job, in excess of $200,000. And I don't know, an MP makes more than that. So you should be able to attack this program. You got 28 MPs. You got 28 individuals that are looking at individual issues. Get it together. Get it together, folks. I don't want to hear this, and I don't want to see my income taxes go up. I'm retired. My wife is retired. We paid 42% of her goddamn income excuse me. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. Last year in taxes. That is not acceptable. It's not acceptable. We can't catch up. We're beginning to fall behind. Only slightly. We only had to make a few adjustments. I admit, nothing major, but we have to make adjustments. And I'm 80. She's in her 60s. We shouldn't have to do that.
Okay, Tony. Appreciate the call. Take care.
Have a great day. Thank you.
All right, 902-405-6000. Jay, hello. Hi, Jay. Jay, are you there? I'll put you on hold. 902-405-6000. Barry, hello.
Hi, Todd.
Hi there.
Nobody seems to be talking about the positive aspects of uranium, and that is half the power in Nova Scotia is generated by burning coal, and these small uranium reactors that they've developed.
Yeah, modular reactors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I have to smile every time I see an EV going by, because I'm wondering if the driver realizes that he's causing more pollution than a gasoline vehicle. And that's because in Nova Scotia, half our power is generated by burning coal.
Yeah, that number is going to come down though exponentially, and I don't know if it's half. I think it's a little less than half. But you're right. Right as of right now, it is.
Well, that's just my comments for the day.
Okay, thanks for the call. 902-405-6000. Let's try Jay again. Hello, Jay.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Todd?
I get you. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So I like the conversation on exploring our natural resources. One question I have: no party remains in power all the time, right? So what happens? Two parties, 2 elections down, another party comes in, and maybe the flavor of the day is let's not explore anymore. What happens to these companies? I found that in Nova Scotia, we tend to turn the tables quite often, depending on how the people feel. So would there be any protections for companies when they start investing in exploration because there's a ton of money that goes into it before they start making a profit. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that's a great point and a legitimate point as well, because you're absolutely right. These companies, it's decades and decades that they need in order to get a return on investment, and you're absolutely right. If they're a little sketchy about what the next government's going to do or come in or shut it down, unpredictability, lack of and volatility is not conducive to long-term investment. So you're absolutely bang on, Jay. I think you raised some good points. We need some continuity when it comes to policy and these types of things, because you make because you are making a very valid point. If a company is sketchy about 4 years election cycles and what's coming next, then they're not going to invest in the province or the country. And I think that's a great point.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Valid point. 902-405-6000. Eric, hello.
Hi, Todd. How you doing, man? It's so nice out, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I can't wait to get back out there.
Yeah, you're going to enjoy it. Anyways, listen, I don't know if you're aware of this. I came across this inadvertently last night, and it happened to be on ABC News today. I guess either tomorrow or Friday, we're getting hit with the possibility of a G5, that's the extreme solar flare.
Okay.
And it could cause a lot of trouble. It all depends how it morphs out. But if it comes in full force, like last year at the same time, Puerto Rico was knocked out. The grid in Puerto Rico was knocked out. And this recently, it may have been a solar flare that knocked out Spain and Portugal for a couple of days. It's pretty serious stuff. I listened to a young astrophysicist, and he's been right on with a lot of the stuff. He talks about all the indications that he have, and he was pretty well right on the money last year. And he's not saying we might get lucky again or we might not, but it could be a very serious problem. So they have the ability today to be able to forecast space weather and all that kind of stuff. And I can remember when Juan first came, nobody here was paying attention to hurricanes. Mm. And then it was a big mess. And then from then on, people were being prepared. I'm wondering, and see how you feel, should it be time that the government talks about possibilities when these solar flares are heading our way, that maybe people should prepare just in case there is a blackout? Because if there is and it knocks out the whole grid, man, it's going to be a mess.
Yeah, well,
I'd like to talk to Dr. Rob.
Yeah, I was going to say, this sounds like Rob Thacker material to me, but above my pay grade or my IQ level, big time. But Rob Thacker will be back next week. So, but when you say when is it happening again?
They're saying tomorrow or 17th and 18th, I guess.
Okay.
How it's going to morph, but the way it was explained, it's a real big one. And this guy explained it all, so I'm not going to get into that. The other thing, with fossil fuels, I'm all for fossil fuels as long as it's done reasonably. And I'm for the green approach as long as it's integrated and you don't shut down everything and, put all your eggs in one basket. Because as you mentioned, it's just way too expensive just to drop one thing and go to another. I don't even know if it's practical. Anyways, you enjoy the afternoon.
Okay, Eric, call back and see what Rob Thacker has to say about all this on Tuesday. Thanks, pal.
Okay.
All right,
bye.
take care. 902-405-6000. What is on your mind today, folks? We got some open lines for you. We're taking calls to the top of the hour as well. Natural resource extraction. A lot of conversation about this today. Nova Scotia's added uranium to its list of priority critical minerals and has issued a request for exploration proposals at 3 sites in the province. The Natural Resources Minister Tory Russian says the list includes critical minerals that the province considers a priority for development. What are your thoughts on this, folks? Do you think that we should be forging ahead with natural resource extraction like uranium, lithium, or others, or is it just too risky environmentally? Also, of course, we're talking about Mark Carney and his lack of a budget this year. I think it's a misstep. I think it would have been a great opportunity for Mark Carney to show his economic prowess, supposed economic prowess, and deliver a budget, but he's chosen not to, and I think that's a misstep. Or whatever else you've got in your mind. Again, the way to reach us, 902-405-6000. Your calls continue when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. When it comes to natural resources and the development of natural resources, including uranium. Yes or no here in Nova Scotia? Do you think that we need to? The government of the day certainly does, and has added uranium to its list of priority critical minerals and issued a request for exploration proposals at 3 sites. And the argument is that the world needs uranium, and we need the revenue, and we need the long-term economic viability. And, of course, the counter-argument is the environment. And, look, I see arguments on both sides. What's your take on this? 902-405-6000. Tony, hello.
Yes, good morning, Todd. Regarding the uranium, Saskatchewan has got this down to a fine art, and they supply virtually all the uranium for all of North America, for the United States, for anywhere there's a nuclear reactor. They supply France and everybody. I don't see why we have to dig up half the province to find these little things that glow in the dark. It's not a whole lot of jobs involved because it's the uranium, so it is dangerous. So it's all automated in machines, and they're all remotely controlled. So I don't want to see the province all dug up for that. Secondly, looking for all these other lithium and dilithium and whatever, I think the areas where we have that are so few and so scattered, it's going to be just terrible. You're going to have to dig up tons and tons and tons of iron ore or rock or whatever just to get a couple ounces out. I mean, if you don't think it's going to be an eyesore, just look at the gold mine that they dug up in the big pit they got there. I'm sure you can see that from the space shuttle. So, I think that's what's going to happen here. I think they're grabbing at the other thing. Let Saskatchewan have all the fun. They've already got it down to a science.
Well, Tony, if they've got it down to a science, why can't we replicate that here? I'm just trying to be devil's advocate here, that's all.
Okay, no, I understand that. Okay, now the thing is we don't know how much is here, and that's the whole issue. And so, what are you going to do? Dig up half the province to find it?
Well, again, I don't know what the process is for exploration. Do you know? Do you have a better knowledge than I do? And I'm not saying you don't, by the way. I'm just curious what your background, how you know this.
Okay, well, I guess they're going to have to drill and then take samples and all that, like they did for iron ore and for gold and all this other kind of stuff. But the question is, they're going to have some pretty good areas. Otherwise, they're going to make this province, just like fracking in the United States. They got, a well every 100 feet, it seems. And that's, how do you fix that? Well, you don't.
So you're anyway. So Tony, you're a no when it comes to this, are you?
Well, no, I'm saying we should go ahead, but we have to be careful doing this. Like if someone else is doing it better than we are, and let them have it. And they've got an unlimited supply apparently, so there's not a rush. Why would we compete with another province if if the issue here is one of the issues should be anyway, the free trade between the provinces. If they do it better than us, good, let them have it.
Well, I guess the argument could be made, why not get in on it when it comes to the economic viability and the profitability of it? And what are anything to that, Tony, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I rather expect that the profitability is going to be because the government and the feds are going to give them all kinds of money. And then at the end of the day, when they say we can't find it or it's not viable or whatever, they just walk away with all the money in their pocket and we're left with the mess to clean up.
Okay, Tony. Appreciate the call, pal.
Thank you.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Don, hello. Hi, Don.
Good morning. How are you doing? Pretty good?
I'm okay, yeah. You?
Not too bad. Anyway, just 3 or 4 little things, Todd. First of all, with the election, we lost. You know who I am. I'm a conservative, 100%. We lost. I'm surprised. But I got to tell you something, really. A couple of days before the election, I was talking to this business guy from Nova Scotia, big, business guy, imports stuff overseas and all of that. And he was telling me, and he said, I'm going to vote election day. He said, I'm voting conservative, but they're not going to win. And he said, I hope the Liberals win. I said, what? And he explained to me after, he said, as soon as they get in within a year, he's expecting, this guy is, he's expecting 2 years there will be another election because there's so much going on that we're financially strapped. The person on the street will tell you that too. We're financially strapped, and it doesn't take a bank manager or whatever you want to call them to figure it all out. Now the other thing is that uranium. Yeah, I'm all for that. Anything with anything to do with that there. Now the other little thing is the Leafs last night, they blew it. Okay?
Yeah.
If they blow it tomorrow night, which they might, but I think they're going to win tomorrow night, really.
Why do you say that? Why do you think they're going to win?
Well, they're hungry. They're going to get hungry. We got to get Matthews out there scoring. We're not seeing him personally ourselves on the ice. I know that, but he's got to start scoring. All those big shot, not big shot. I don't mean that. All those big players are getting all the money. You can see it. They're not putting a lot of real effort into it. And I know this doctor that calls the games all the time, and he said Vegas is not over yet either. They'll come back and they might just take out Oilers right away.
Well, the Oilers already won. They wrapped it up last night.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see that, Todd. I apologize.
It's okay. No problem.
But he said it's going to be between it's going to be the Panthers or Dallas, whichever way he said it's going to take. But he said he puts his money on Dallas. He's not a betting man. Now, the other thing is, too, is that if the Leafs loses, which I can't give up 100%, one thing they should do is clean house. Upper management. Get rid of Shanahan, get rid of the manager, and bring in Mark Messier to clean house and get this team back to where it should be at. Honestly, Mark Messier wouldn't fool around with anybody. Keep most of the players. The key to players are good, really. But management, I was never a Shanahan fan anyway, ever. And the manager, he comes from Calgary. He didn't do nothing out there. And we put on to him. But that's my little, opinion, and that's all to it. But it's nice talking to you.
Okay, Don. Take care, pal.
Hey, enjoy your donut, okay?
All right. Take care, pal. All right. All right. So, yeah, listen, folks, when it comes to the Leafs, we have this conversation every single year, right? They need to clean house, and I don't know what else they can do. I mean, Craig Berube is as tough as a customer as they come. I don't know if it's toughness that you can reference as not having that quality and certainly skill. Look, they've added a lot of key components to this team. Their defense is better than it's been. I think that losing Stolarz was bigger than we're realizing at this point. And I'm not blaming Wall at all. I know that rhymed. But Wall is not a number one guy. He's just not that guy. He's not like Bobrovsky who can shut a team down. And Stolarz is a better goalie. And perhaps Stolarz makes a couple key saves at a couple key moments in which Wall didn't. And again, I'm not blaming Wall because the entire team absolutely wears this. But I don't agree that it's a lack of effort or lack of passion. I don't agree with that. I just think that Florida is just a better hockey team. I mean, to think that the Leafs weren't going out there and trying, I don't buy that. I just think that they were frustrated, and when you get frustrated, you don't play well, and you lose your confidence. And that's the Leafs have zero confidence right now, and I think that they shouldn't have any confidence. Now, can they regroup? You never know. I guess you never know. I'm not going to rule it out. Certainly they could go into Florida and win. They could do that. That's not unrealistic. It's not like there's a minor hockey team playing a pro team. They should be able to get it done. Will they get it done? I don't know. But I do know that cleaning house and all that, and we say these things every year, they've done all that. There's nothing else the Leafs can do than what they've done. They've invested all kinds of money in the team, and they've added key components, and they've got tougher, and they've got a good coach. I don't know what else the solutions are, but I get the frustration of the fan base because I've been a fan since I've been alive, and they've not won a cup in my lifetime. So we come by it honestly. Thanks for the calls, everybody. We appreciate it. We'll open the phone lines tomorrow again between 11 and 12. The federal government should reform capital gains taxes to spur economic growth. We'll get into that when we come back. If the federal government wants to spur entrepreneurship and increase economic growth, it should reform capital gains taxes in Canada. Finds two new essay published by the Fraser Institute Joining us to discuss all this is Jake Foss, Director of Fiscal Studies at the Fraser Institute. Jake, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks very much for having me on.
All right, so let's talk about Capital Gains 101. Let's go to the Capital Gains 101 school and explain to everybody what this is all about.
Yeah, so when you purchase an asset, think a property or a stock, for instance, and you sell it for a higher price, the profit is called a capital gain. And in Canada, we tax capital gains nominally, which means the gains are not adjusted for inflation, which actually results in very inconsistent tax rates from year to year. And capital gains are ultimately very important for encouraging investment in entrepreneurship in Canada. If you have very high capital gains taxes compared to other countries, for instance, you're not getting the same level of job creation, investment, all of the things that we need more of to get higher wages for workers, better job creation, and ultimately higher living standards for Canadians too.
Okay, so where are we right now when it comes to policy on capital gains? What are the rules?
Well, there's a few things right now. So Canada doesn't allow what we call a rollover in capital gains, which is something that Australia and the United States actually offer, which makes them more attractive. So a rollover is essentially allowing an entrepreneur or an investor to defer their capital gains taxes if they reinvest the proceeds from the sale of an asset into a similar new asset within a specified period of time. So the entrepreneur actually benefits through this, and it actually allows for more investment into Canada, allows for more machinery, equipment, productivity, all the things that we need more of in Canada. But that's currently quite restricted, whereas in the United States and Australia, they actually have those options available to entrepreneurs and investors, and it makes them much more attractive to those entrepreneurs and to that investment in general.
Okay, and what has Mark Carney said about all of this, if anything?
So Mark Carney has definitely acknowledged the importance of capital gains taxes and getting the policies right. So he's currently reversing the decision that the Trudeau government made, which was to increase capital gains taxes. So he's reversing that decision to make it more attractive, ultimately, for investment in Canada. But, I think there are still ways that Mark Carney can also go further as the new Prime Minister in making it even more attractive to invest in Canada, because then we're just simply going back to the old system. And I think we can actually take even more steps, which would be, not taxing capital gains nominally, so actually adjusting it for inflation and also implementing the rollover mechanism that I just specified. That would make it very attractive to invest in Canada and ultimately result in better economic growth and living standards for Canadians.
Okay, what might this mean for taxation and revenue for the government?
So it would certainly have a likely impact on revenue. But I think, with these changes, you could also, there might be some short-term pain in terms of losing a little bit of revenue. But in the long run, you're likely going to get greater economic growth, which results in better revenue. So you're actually able to pay for, programs and services with more revenue in the long run. If you have a better economy, you have more job creation, you have people earning higher wages. And that's ultimately what we need more of in Canada. So it could certainly have a very positive effect on revenues in Canada and on our bottom line if we implement these measures effectively.
Okay, and you suggest, or you say that there's empirical data that would support your argument?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look right now, Canada's roughly middle of the pack when we're looking at capital gains taxes in terms of our competitiveness compared to other countries. If we were to implement these measures, we become a lot more attractive and become a lot more competitive with other countries. And we know when we're looking at the empirical data about capital gains taxes, the higher capital gains taxes you have, the more they discourage entrepreneurship and business investment in the economy, which are huge inputs into how much growth you can get in the economy, what the living standards are for Canadians. So we ultimately need to become a lot more competitive on this front.
Okay, and what about I guess as far as businesses go, what's the business sector saying? Obviously, I would think they would support your position.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would certainly be the case. I mean, if you look at what innovators are calling for in Canada, right now we have a very uncompetitive tax system compared to a lot of other comparable countries around the world. We ultimately do need not to just tinker around the edges with our system. We do need big, bold reforms in our system because we've really had a stagnant economy, not just because of tariffs and other things that are happening right now, but for many years we've had a stagnant economy now and stagnant wages and other things for Canadians. And we ultimately need to make big changes, and we can't just simply say, maintain the status quo and hope for the best. That's not a real strategy. We need to make changes in our tax system in particular.
All right. So when it comes to businesses and investment, they will recognize, especially those that have mobility, they definitely pay attention to this stuff. That's the reality, right?
Absolutely. If you look at the empirical research around, the attractiveness of capital and high-skilled workers and entrepreneurs and et cetera, they're quite sensitive to tax rates. So that's not the only factor that they consider when they're investing or moving to a specific country, but it is one of the biggest factors, and it's certainly the case for doctors, entrepreneurs, engineers, et cetera. They are quite sensitive to how high your personal income taxes are, your capital gains taxes are, and all of these factors ultimately add up to that. And if you make a very unattractive system to them, they're likely going to take their money elsewhere and not locate themselves in your jurisdiction as well. So that's one of the biggest challenges we have to overcome in Canada currently.
Okay, we often hear the argument that this is a tax on the rich and the rich need to pay their fair share. What's your response to that?
Well, if we actually look at capital gains data on this, the government was moving to increase taxes on capital gains for those realized above $250,000, and this was phrased as only affecting the wealthiest individuals. But when we actually look at the data, about 50% of taxpayers who claim more than $250,000 of capital gains in a year earn less than $118,000 in normal annual income. So there's a lot of people with just modest annual incomes who either own businesses, second homes, or stocks, who choose to sell these assets once or infrequently in their lifetimes, like when they retire. So it's not simply the case that the capital gains taxes only affect the rich. They affect a lot of people in Canada with only modest annual incomes.
Okay, Jake, and this is available on your website, obviously?
Yes, exactly. If you go to www.fraserinstitute.org, you can check out the study and all of the links associated with it.
Okay, appreciate your time. Thanks so much. We'll do it again.
Great. Thanks very much for having me.
All right, take care. Jake Foss, Director of Fiscal Studies at the Fraser Institute. Former hockey player continues testifying at ex-teammate sex assault trial involving these former Canadian junior hockey players. We'll talk about all this with Wayne MacKay when we come back. A former member of Canada's World Junior Hockey Team continues testifying at the sexual assault trial of 5 of his ex-teammates. Tyler Steenbergen began testifying by video conference Wednesday afternoon at the trial of the players involved, the 5 accused. Joining us to discuss all of this is Wayne MacKay, Professor Emeritus of Law at Dalhousie University. Wayne, thanks for joining the show.
No problem.
All right, so I guess what are your thoughts, I guess, to this point? I know that's a broad question, but there's lots and lots to digest with all of this. What are some of the things in this trial that kind of stand out that you think are noteworthy?
Well, as you say, there is a lot to digest for sure, and some of it's not very digestible.
Yeah, exactly.
Heartburn or worse.
Sure.
But I think that there are a number of important issues, and unfortunately, hopefully these things are not every day, obviously, but it's not as rare that these kind of things happen as we want. Certainly, sexual assault generally all too rare, but even these fairly extreme forms. But I think one thing that makes this case unique is the high profile because of the people who are accused, the 2018 junior team and the people involved. And that's one. A second is that the issue of consent, which is obviously crucial in most of these, is certainly front and center. And as we discovered with the cross-examination of the complainant in this case, their main defense is there was consent, and that's a noteworthy point in this sense that I think there were 9 days. I can't remember
9 days on the stand. Yeah,
9 days on the stand and being cross-examined by 5 different defense lawyers as well as examined by the prosecutor. Obviously a very difficult ordeal for her, which is highlighted by this. There are some protections now of the kind of questions, but even with that, some very difficult questioning and difficult interaction to add to the trauma that she's already experienced. So that's highlighted by this case. And I suppose ultimately, and this part hasn't happened yet, what will really be significant is what will come out of this. What will be the decision? And to be fair, none of this is decided or proven in court yet, but if they are convicted, what will happen? All of those kind of things are playing out. So it's kind of not quite to the same extreme, but because of its high publicity, almost our own version of the high-profile cases in the U.S. of this kind of thing as well.
What was the time lag, 2018 till now? Does that play a factor? I suppose it might when it comes to memory and testimony and people's recollection. What about that lapse of time?
Well, that's a really significant point as well, that it's difficult, given the trauma and the emotions involved in these kind of things, to remember clearly after the fact for any of them, the accused or the alleged victim. But when you've got a 7-year delay, it is that much worse. And that delay, in part, of course, was because the original investigation didn't, the police felt there was not enough to proceed, but then as more came out, they decided they needed to proceed. So it's another reflection of not only the slowness of the system to respond, which it clearly is, but the possible injustice that in itself does. And then add on to that another element which raises some really interesting points as well, is the intoxication, probably of all the parties, but certainly there's been much evidence about the intoxication of the victim, but no doubt to some degree intoxication of the accused. Obviously no excuse for the accused, but the intoxication makes it easier for them to press her on her precise recollections and so on.
Yeah, exactly. And she said while no one physically forced her to engage in sexual acts, she was scared and felt she had no choice but to go along with what the men in the room wanted her to do. And video evidence was introduced, and I guess, look, I understand that this must be extremely difficult for the victim to come forward, and it takes a lot of courage to do so. But that said, some of this evidence, and again, I'm not a judge and I'm not an expert, but some of it seems to me that the defense has a case here. I hope that's not misinterpreted. What's your response to that?
No, I know what you're saying, and it is important to be delicate in this because there are such important and difficult issues. But I think there is. I think when we talked last, I was making the point that I didn't even really imagine what the defense lawyers could say as to consent kind of issues. But when they make some of the arguments, you can see that the role of the judge is a difficult one here, because he or she, I think it's actually a she, and then it's a jury, if I recall. But anyway, they have to decide, or is it a jury? I can't quite remember at the moment. But anyway, whoever is deciding this has to be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that this happened. And some of the testimony, because in part of the time delay, perhaps because of the intoxication, some of the evidence from the victim is not as clear as one would hope it would be. And that's kind of understandable completely. And again, like you, I don't want to be misinterpreted on this, but I know exactly what you're saying about that. On the other hand, very important that in addition to the intoxication and time delay factors, that we need to factor in the psychological impact on this young woman, and that on the earlier point, you've got 5 much larger men who are wanting things to happen, and how much do you really feel you have any real consent? And I believe some of her testimony was to say, well, I didn't want to be harmed. And while she didn't, as I recall the evidence that I've looked at, say, as you just said, that she was physically forced or directly forced, but the psychological force is huge. The power imbalance is huge, and much more so with 5 as opposed to a single person, and strong, very athletic people, all of that. But it is a difficult thing to sort out, in part because the jurors and the judge need to get it right, and they have to be convinced. And so it's one of the many reasons, unfortunately, so many people do not report these kind of sexual assaults. It's such a grueling process, and difficult to get a conviction. I don't remember exactly at the moment, but the conviction rate for sexual assault cases is quite low because there's so many ways that they can't necessarily prove what happened.
Yeah, and it really tests the rule of law and the fact that the justice needs to be blind in that it needs to look at these things from and the way the law is interpreted dispassionately and all whatever other vernacular that you want to attach to it. But I think that this is a pretty interesting case, and that really kind of tests that rule of law. What are your thoughts?
Well, it does. And in part, that is the high profile, that, the fact that these are high profile, very successful hockey players. And of course, this will have a very, and already has had, no doubt, a very significant impact on their life is one thing. But on the other hand, a huge impact on the victim's life already and will continue to do so. So how do you fairly balance all that out? And how can you be convinced of what actually happened on that night? Because even as you were mentioning in the introduction, the other players not charged giving their testimony can give a little bit of some aspects, but my understanding is as often it was only the people charged and the victim that were there at the critical times. And it's not even just what did they do, the more difficult and almost unprovable question, what was in their head? Were they okay with this at the time, even though they're not okay with it later? Those are very hard questions to conclusively answer. But I think we've come a little distance to being fair to the victim in not expecting them to be crystal clear given the exact circumstances, and recognizing things like alcohol and time make a difference, and that alcohol is no excuse to say, well, I thought that they were consenting, but it's still, at the end of the day, what was in the head of both the victim and the accused when these things were happening.
Yeah, and the fact that all five have gone on with the defense without one of them being contrite or admitting guilt or whatever, does that speak to anything, or what are your thoughts on that?
I'm not sure that goes very far because, of course, there's a kind of camaraderie and obviously value to them in sticking together on that kind of thing. Yeah. And I suppose the other kind of factor, which I think goes on very much on the victim side of this case, is realistically, putting aside the difficult things I just talked about, how realistic is it that someone that much younger, that much overpowered by the large, powerful people in a room with five people, which started out at a single going off with one man, and there's no question that's fine. But how realistic is it that this person would really be okay with all that? Or is it much more realistic as a kind of starting assumption that no, that she was pressured, maybe not physically and directly, into doing what they asked her to do? And I think that's the hard question. And on that one, as I say, that comes down, I think, very much on the victim side. How could you possibly feel completely free to say what you did or did not want to do in that kind of a context?
Wayne, great insight as always. Thanks so much, and we'll do it again.
No problem. Take care.
All right, take care. Wayne MacKay, Law Professor Emeritus at Dalhousie University. Loblaw warns of a surge in tariff-hit food products. We'll discuss this with the food professor when we come back. The number of tariff-hit products at grocery stores could soon spike as pre-tariff inventory runs out, says Loblaw Chief Executive Officer, which means prices for some items will go up as well. Joining us to discuss all of this is Sylvain Charlebois, Senior Director, Agri-Food Analytics Lab, and also, of course, known as the Food Professor. Sylvain, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Todd. You always ask me to comment on very positive news. Great.
I know. Well, what can you say? Right? But,
can we talk about beer next time? Or, I don't know, something positive.
Sure thing. But that said, this is important. I think you'd agree.
Oh, of course, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, first of all, Pierre Banks' announcement, that's the CEO of Loblaw, he used LinkedIn to actually post
I saw that.
His comment. It wasn't a press release, and of course, lots of news outlets picked up on his message. And frankly, I was anticipating something like this for a while now. So he did mention that about 1,000 products are affected by tariffs directly. But that number can go up to 6,000 over the next couple of weeks. I actually think, Todd, it's going to be way more than 6,000, to be honest. But what I thought was interesting in his message, at the very beginning of his message, he was basically acknowledging that the tariff world is changing. This week was pretty phenomenal, with the U.S. and China agreeing to reduce tariffs. India's moving on tariffs. Everyone is moving on tariffs. Well, except Canada. Canada, we're still facing tariffs against the U.S., India, China, because we often talk about our tariff war with the U.S., but we're at war with India and China as well. And that's impacting our food industry overall. So I thought that Pierre Banks' message was very much about poking Ottawa, saying, you know what, before you move on to implement more counter tariffs, which will cost us, Canadians, more money at the grocery store, better be careful.
Maybe he put it on LinkedIn, hoping that nobody would see it.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. It's Pierre Banks. And by the way, I've actually spoken to Pierre Banks. He's a nice guy. He's very humble, but he's not a media friendly guy like Galen Weston. He doesn't like TV. He doesn't like the flash, but he uses. But I think, honestly, that Loblaw use LinkedIn because they're just tired of being accused of profiteering. But at the same time, you do wonder, well, why do you come out with a message like that? You will likely be accused of profiteering using tariffs as an excuse to increase prices. That's the danger with Pierre Banks' strategy. But let's be honest here. This is not just about Loblaw. Other retailers are facing the same reality. Sobeys, Metro, Costco, and we heard this morning Walmart in the U.S. I don't know if you saw that this morning, but Walmart issued a warning to Americans and Canadians. Food prices are going to go up in May and June.
Okay, so when it comes to the number of items, why do you say it's going to go up much higher than what they're indicating, what he's indicated?
Well, I know that Loblaw was meeting with its suppliers in recent weeks, and frankly, what I'm hearing from suppliers is that they're paying more for certain ingredients. Lots of ingredients manufacturers are importing from the U.S. They don't have a choice. It's the only source for them, and they're paying an extra 25% on many ingredients, and 25% is a lot of money in food because of tight margins. And so over the last, I'd say, 2 months, since March the 4th, when the first tariffs came into effect, manufacturers just went through their inventory, but now Loblaw and Sobeys and Metro are going to start buying products that were impacted indirectly by tariffs implemented by Ottawa. And so I think all of that is catching up to grocers and will eventually catch up to all of us as consumers.
Yeah, because you talked about the 6,000, and then, as you mentioned, China and India and whatever, so we don't know what that number will be. I would think administratively this would be very difficult when it comes to pricing, and somebody's got to take care of all of this and figure it out. I would think that logistically it would be a nightmare. What's your take on that?
Oh, absolutely. And I know, Todd, you love Donald Trump. You just love him. I know that. But let's look at the data for a second here, okay? So let's look at what's going on in the U.S. Food inflation is dropping. Despite the nonsense that is coming out of the White House and Donald Trump with tariffs impacting Americans, food inflation is actually dropping. It's at 2%. Versus our own 3.2%. So our food inflation is way more than America's. Their jobless rate is idle. Ours is increasing. Our currency is idle against the Americans, even though the President of the United States is destroying the American currency. So there's lots going on here that are not in our favor economically. So I think that what Loblaw is trying to say to Ottawa, let's tread tariff waters very carefully over the next little while, because we actually may end up in worse shape economically as a result.
All right, so what was already purchased and tariffs, obviously there's a lag here. And so how do they stay on top of what they purchased under the tariff regime as opposed to what isn't or wasn't?
Well, I mean, the one thing I'm hearing from suppliers is that Ottawa can help, but it's not helping right now. So if you're buying, I don't know, chocolate or coffee out of the U.S., you're paying tariffs as an ingredient. There are programs in place, but you have to be the importer of record and the company processing. A lot of these companies are dealing with brokers and agents, so they don't qualify for any of the money provided by Ottawa. So from a bureaucratic point of view, Ottawa is a bit of a mess when it comes to supporting the food industry. I would start there. So that would actually help a lot of manufacturers, and a lot of them are right here in the Atlantic. So that's one thing. The other thing, of course, diplomatically, we got a lot of work to do. So we got Anita Anand and, of course, the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, handling international affairs. They need to get going here. We need better diplomacy, because the last 10 years it's been just a disaster.
Okay, what about those who would suggest that perhaps Loblaws should eat some of these costs themselves as opposed to just passing them on? What's your response to that?
Well, I think that Loblaw needs to be careful here. So we're talking about food, and Loblaw will have options. It's a diversified company like others, like Sobeys, for example. It has shoppers. You can actually generate more income by increasing prices for non-food items. So if you don't want to make food security an issue as the number one grocer in the country, I would look at prices outside of non-food food items and try to make sure that you keep your food basket as affordable as possible for Canadians. That's what I would do if I were Loblaws, for sure.
Okay, so you mentioned Sobeys. They'd likely be next, you're suggesting?
Well, so actually, yesterday was Loblaw, today was Walmart, and Walmart's a big one. Let's face it. Yeah. But the other thing, we need to be real here. When these companies come out and say, "Well, food prices are going to go up," well, are they really? I mean, are they really going to go up, or are you just trying to send a political message? And I think that Walmart's message this morning in the U.S. was very much about Donald Trump. Everyone agrees that tariffs are stupid. I mean, they are stupid. It's a stupid strategy. And Walmart is the largest grocer, the largest retailer in the world. Someone in the White House will pay attention.
And what about the real smaller kind of like the gateways and these type of retailers? Where do you think how impacted are they?
They're doing great, Todd. I mean, So last week we published the Canadian Food Sentiment Index, and it came out. I think you talked to one of my colleagues last week about the index, and the Buy Canadian movement has been phenomenal. Independent grocers like Gateway or Dave's Fruits, for example, they're doing awesome. Why? Because Canadians are engaged. They're looking at where their food is coming from, and that's always a good thing.
Well, Sylvain, appreciate it as always. Thanks, my friend.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, you got it. Sylvain Charlebois, the food professor, senior director, Agri-Food Analytics Lab. The book is called Every Little Thing, How Small Acts of Kindness Make a Big Impact. Veteran journalist Janice Landry, an author, joins me when we come back. All right, the book is called Every Little Thing, How Small Acts of Kindness Makes a Big Impact. The author, Janice Landry, joins me here in studio. Janice is a veteran journalist, proud Haligonian, and you can't hear?
No.
Okay. There's a volume control down to your right.
But I can hear you. So
no, there's a volume. If you reach down there where the headphones are plugged in, this is live radio, folks. Turn them up.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Yeah, no, I don't care if it's live or not. I've worked live for years. We'll just roll with it. It doesn't matter to me.
That's right.
This is real time. This is life.
That's right. All right, so this is your 7th book, eh?
It is. But you know what? I'm telling people, I know that's not a small thing to say, so I'm really grateful for that. But I'm telling people it almost feels, Todd, like my first one. And why is that? Because this is the first thing that I did as a journalist and writer after my diagnosis with Lyme disease.
Mm-hmm.
I was so sick that I believed I would never work again or function in society. So for me, this is almost a rebirth in my life and in my work. And to me, this is, you know, when those big events happen in your life, it could be marriage, it could be a death, it could be a job loss, it could be an illness. Well, for me, it was an illness. And it's kind of like your life before the thing happened and your life after the thing happened. And for me, this is really like a new beginning for Janice.
Yeah. Okay, well, there's so many things we can get to. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Rick Howe, of course, whose birthday was yesterday.
Yes, and I mean, I have to tell you, Rick was my friend. His wife, Yvonne Colbert, who is listening right now, is like a sister to me. Mm-hmm. And I have to tell you, firstly, what a deep, deep honor it is to walk through the doors of the Rick Howe studio, to be with you. I don't take it lightly. It's a huge thing. And yes, yesterday was Rick Howe's birthday. And if I can, I'm going to tell a little quick story to tie in some news for listeners. Sure. In the book, Every Little Thing, the prologue is really to honor Rick Howe. And in the prologue of the book, I talk about Rick's last act of kindness. And at his celebration of life, which happened in Halifax on May 11th, 2024, Rick's final wish was, if people could swing it and afford it, to bring a small bouquet of flowers to be left in baskets at his celebration of life, to be later distributed amongst the community to people who normally never receive flowers. Mm-hmm. And I was there at a celebration of life, and I can bear witness to the fact that there were many, many bouquets of flowers from his friends, family, and listeners. Mm-hmm. He also included listeners to come to his final event, because he was of the people and for the people. And after, his family, led by his wife Yvonne Colbert, and his sons and families went out and distributed the flowers to people like Shelter, Nova Scotia, Adsum House, Northwood, and the Ronald McDonald House. And for example, Shelter, Nova Scotia posthumously said Rick was a community champion for this because, quote, his final act of kindness was to show how he felt about people. And with the flowers, Todd, the family included this little note that Rick wanted, which said, and I'm reading quote verbatim here, "These flowers are compliments of Rick Howe, radio talk show host and journalist. He hoped they would brighten your day. You matter." And of course, those last two words are huge in small acts of kindness, whether they're done by Rick Howe or you or me or someone listening today. They tell people who are on the receiving end of them that they do matter. And yesterday was Rick's birthday, and I was speaking with Yvonne Colbert today, who tells me, and your show exclusively, that yesterday on Rick's birthday, they went out to distribute flowers in Rick's memory again for a second time, including Shelter, Nova Scotia and Adsum House. And this quote is from Yvonne, who says, "We are making it an annual family tradition to honor and remember Rick and his concern and care for others." That quote from Rick's wife, Yvonne Colbert. So that exclusively here today, that tradition continues in Rick's memory.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, and it's humbling to sit in this chair, you know, and to try and emulate Rick, or you never replicate Rick, obviously, but I do my best on a daily basis to adhere to the standard that Rick had when it came to giving people a voice.
Well, you know, I don't think that anyone expects you to be Rick or try to be in Rick's footsteps. You're you, and I think that he would admire the fact that you do have a dedication to the craft. So the fact that you do have, you know, you feel that way is really, really lovely for us as his friends and family members. But, you know, it's just great that you're continuing it on, because it's important that people do have a voice. And so thank you for doing that.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about a little more about the book and the Lyme and that journey, I guess. So fortunately, you were diagnosed and got the medication that you needed and the antibiotics, and you're okay now.
I am okay. It was really rough, though. I have to say it was a rough old go, as we say, in 2023. So I didn't know I had been bitten by a tick. I just got progressively sicker and sicker. And eventually I went to my doctor at Dalhousie University Health, where I've gone since I was a student. And I got into an on-call doctor. And when I literally took my top off for examination, I had from all from my toes right up to my neck on half of my body, I had rashes. And there are two types of rashes for Lyme typically. You can Google this stuff. One is a typical bullseye style rash. I didn't have that. Mine were sort of oblong and sort of maroon in color. And it was scary because they just kept coming and coming and coming. And when you have rashes literally over half your body from your toes right up to your face, it's scary. And you're really, really sick. And when I took my top off, the doctor looked at me in 2 seconds and she said, yeah, you have Lyme and you should probably sit down, because I thought this was a fairly standard doctor call. I didn't bring my daughter or my husband with me. It was just me. And you could have knocked me over with a feather, Todd, because I had no idea just how sick I was. So yes, I got diagnosed in stage 2. I did a hard round of antibiotics for 3 weeks. It cured me, but it killed my gut biome. So my digestive system was completely out of whack. It took me months to come back. But, here I am today sitting across from you and honoring our friend and participating in society. So that's why this book it's a gift for my husband, Rob Dauphiny, and daughter, Laura Dauphiny, to thank them for being there for me as my helpers.
Okay. Tell us about the subject matter a little bit more. Delve into that.
Yeah. There's 10 chapters in here, Todd, and there are people representing different walks of life and cultures from across Canada and around the world, because acts of kindness know no cultural barrier. It's, everybody everywhere does them. And people don't do acts of kindness for good karma. They do it because there's a need. We need more and more of this. And I'm a former longtime journalist here in the city. I still consider myself a journalist, but I'm not working in mainstream media. And as journalists, and you get this from your own listeners, there's always the big criticism. Well, how come we don't have enough positive news stories? So post-diagnosis and getting better, this is an entire book of uplifting, joyful stories about acts, small and big acts of kindness that people have done to help others, and the ripple effect of that, right? Because if you go back in your life and think of something that someone's done for you, I'm hoping that listeners are doing that now. So-and-so did this for me a few years ago. I never forgot it. In the book, there's a story of one of my former students from the Mount. I'm an only kid, and when my mom died, I had her purse, her last purse that she was carrying, and in it was her final tube of lipstick. Well, everybody who knows me knows I'm a lipstick nut. I've got it on here today. I wear it at home by myself. It's just my thing. It was also my mother Teresa's thing. And when I post on social media about Mom, I said I only have this one tube of lipstick left. It's running out. I only use it on special occasions. And one of my former students from the Mount went out, tracked down, and found the last tube of lipstick my mom wore and gave it to me as a small act of kindness. So, you don't have to spend a lot of money. It can be just time spent, right? We've all had moments where we just need people to be with us, to sit with us, to walk with us. And these are the things that are in the book, all these little acts that have had a huge impact on people. And the book is little because it was a little tick that had a big impact on me. So it's a little book with a big message.
How did you mine this for the stories? How did you go out and harvest the stories?
Good question. A lot of people ask me that. Some of the stories have been percolating for me as a storyteller. The opening story comes from when I was 10 years old. So it's been percolating for 5 decades. I knew I would honor my elementary school French teacher who wrote me a note when I was in school. I've kept the note. So it's me knowing these stories are coming out. The last story is about a nurse from Cape Breton who helped my father after his quadruple bypass open heart surgery. So it's me thanking all nurses at the end of the book, teachers at the beginning of the book. Those ones I knew I had. Sometimes I see things and I go, okay, I know what my main themes are, acts of kindness, connection, community building, and I'll look for other things online. People I meet at conferences. It could be any different way, but I'm looking for those threads as a storyteller every day of my life, and then eventually I can try and connect them together.
Yeah, and Pottersfield Press is the publisher.
Yes, Pottersfield Press is my longtime publisher, Leslie Choice, who is the original sort of surfer here in Nova Scotia, one of the coolest guys I know. And he came over to my house about a week or so ago to deliver, Todd, a box of books to me and shake my hand, look me in the eye and thank me. And that morning he had been out surfing. So you have to, this is the type of guy who's my publisher. He's super chill. I'm completely the opposite, super intense, but somehow it works. And he really stands by what I'm doing. He and his wife, Linda, and the whole team at Pottersfield know what I'm trying to do in terms of advocacy with my books. And so I cannot thank that team enough.
How do people get the book?
So the book is really in many stores in Nova Scotia. If you don't see it, you can go to your favorite store and they can order it in. It's at my website, janicelandry.ca, nimbus.ca, amazon.ca. You can get it in bookstores. It's out there, and I'm going around doing signings, so you can check out my social media. Connect with me. I want to hear about your acts of kindness. So send me a friend request or start following me. I'm on most social media platforms, except TikTok. I leave that for my daughter.
any follow-up, perhaps?
Yeah, I have an idea. I actually am 2 interviews in on the idea. Yeah. Good for you for asking. I can't say exactly what it is, but when you're a storyteller, like my late mentor, Bill Jessam, you come in as a storyteller and you go out as one. So because of my health, I pace myself better. I know Yvonne's listening, and my friend Peter Millet's coming into town soon, and they were both on me about pacing myself after this illness, and I do, and I love them, and I thank all of my close friends for their love and support and care. I cannot do what I do without my people, and I know some of them are listening today, and I love you guys so much. So yeah, I'm working on something, but I'm going to pace myself.
All right, when it's completed, come back, please.
I would love to. Thank you for the invitation.
Okay, Janice, great stuff. Thanks so much. Great stuff. Janice Landry. And it's called Every Little Thing, How Small Acts of Kindness Make a Big Impact. Check it out. It's published by Pottersfield Press, rather. And thanks for coming in. Thanks to Vanessa Van Den Ness on the other side of the glass, the control boards, doing a fine job as always. We're back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. See you then.